So this is URL to IRL, use online tools to make connections in real life. So we have an amazing panel today. I'm Kathryn, I'm an industrial design major here at Pratt, a junior. So I'd just like our panel over here to introduce yourselves, say your company, your title, and what you do for your company.
Start with me. Hi, I'm Nisha Chital. I am head of social media at Travel Channel. We're actually based in Washington, D.C. So I oversee all of the network's social media strategy, campaign development, execution, growing of our communities, what platforms we're on, what platforms we should be trying, brainstorming ways to find creative ways to engage with our fans and our viewers. So that is what I do.
I'm Jim Hannes. I'm the social media editor at the New York Observer. Just like some of the stuff you heard, I manage all the social media channels, messaging, and workflow, and I also do a lot of kind of audience development type tasks, including analytics, finding new opportunities for growth, new opportunities to make our content more spreadable.
My name is Mark Lucky. I am the manager of journalism and news at Twitter. I work with journalists and news organizations to help them use the platform, think of new and creative ways that they can use it, and also taking the ideas that they have for improving Twitter to the Twitter staff and making those ideas come to life.
And I'm Ryan Chapman, marketing director at the Penguin Press, which is a 10-year-old imprint under the corporate Penguin, and in addition to kind of the more traditional marketing initiatives with our books, I run our social media, and a lot of that is basically talking to readers and other people in the industry, and hoping they buy more books.
Awesome. So a little rundown of how the session's going to go. We're going to have 30 minutes of the panel answering questions from me, and then 15 minutes at the end for you guys to ask questions. So first question for our panel is, how important is it to have an online presence?
Very.
I think it's critical. We were talking about this before the panel, but I think many of us agree that one of the first things we do when we get a resume across our desk is Google that person. And I know I often find when I Google a candidate, it seems like people always hide their online presence as much as they can so that no employer can find it. And it's actually, I find, kind of disappointing. I would rather see what your online presence is, especially if it's very professional, but I want to see what you're doing, what you're interested in, what kind of work you have. So I think it's really critical to have that stuff. And when I Google a potential job candidate and I can't find anything about you, I think that's sort of concerning.
Especially if you're working in sort of a media or social media or anything that has to do with communicating with the public. If you don't have some sort of presence, and not just your own website, but also a Twitter page, Facebook page, a Tumblr page, someplace that when I go to Google, I'm finding exactly who you are. And you should make sure that that's representative of who you are, because again, that's usually the first thing that people are looking at. Sometimes people call me up and I'm Googling them with one hand and talking to them on the phone with the other, like trying to figure out who I'm talking to. So you want to make sure that you have a robust online presence.
And speaking of that, so if you guys want to elaborate on how, what you would be looking for exactly, the proper etiquette you guys would be looking for.
I mean, I think that to some degree your online presence is your resume. Unless there's a typo in your resume, I tend not to really focus too much on it. Because at this point, especially with media jobs and any position that we hire for, even with interns, we're looking for kind of an online literacy, and I'm hoping that they are conversant in even some of the nascent social media platforms that I'm kind of hearing about or I'm not as well versed in, because I want them to bring those skills to our team. Does that make sense?
At Twitter, what we're looking for is a great personality more than anything. You could have sort of like a less than stellar resume, still being competent, but if you have a better personality than the person sitting next to you, then you're going to be more likely to get the job. But in order to get the interview, to get your foot in the door, that your online presence has to be a reflection of your personality. So if you like cooking, I'm expecting to see cooking vlogs. I'm expecting to see YouTube videos. If you like dogs, I want to see photos of your dog. Like, I need to know what it is that makes your personality sparkle much more than sort of other people who may be applying for the same job.
Okay, so I guess what particular things stand out to you when you look through all these applicants and whatever?
I think at very, very minimum, you have to have a LinkedIn. I think second to that, you should be on Twitter. You know, at least for any sort of media job. I think if you're looking for a job in some more conservative fields, that may not apply, but in any sort of media or creative field, I think having a Twitter, having a blog, those are all pluses. I love when someone has a blog, like you said, if you're passionate about cooking, if you have a cooking blog, it doesn't necessarily have to be a professional blog about your industry, but just the fact that you are passionate about something and you're creating content about it, that shows that, you know, you're driven and you're passionate, and I think that speaks well to employers.
I was just going to say, so it's not just enough to have a Twitter profile now, because everybody has a Twitter profile, and if you don't, then please start one right now.
You'd be shocked though. There are so many people, I get resumes and I Google them and they don't have Twitter.
Yeah, and it's
so shocked at how many people.
Especially if you're going to work in media, or especially if you're going to work at Twitter, come on. But the one thing that I look for on the Twitter profile, a lot of people sort of look at followers and, you know, how many people you're following as a metric. I actually look to see what lists you've been added to. So if you go to anybody's Twitter profile, on the left-hand side, you'll see a link that says lists. Now you can create lists on Twitter, you can add different people in different categories. So if lots of people are adding you to lists, that means that they believe that you are smart in a particular area. So that could be, you know, media, that could be intern, that could be, you know, New York, whatever. If nobody's added you to a list, or you have very few lists that you've been added to in a ratio to your following and followers, I'm going to be a little bit more suspicious. I'm going to, I want to know that other people have put their vote in your ballot, and so that I will have more confidence in your abilities.
So, Jim, I wanted to ask you this, since we were talking about this before, but what's one of the memorable stories about creating content via social media?
Well, the story I was actually going to talk about was about requesting stuff electronically, which is a lesson that's kind of stuck with me about approaching people, which is that when I was younger working in a newspaper in Memphis, I wrote to somebody who was an editor at a much larger paper asking him for advice via email, and I began with this very long apology about, oh, I know you're important and you have this time and stuff like that, and he wrote me back and he said, and the very first thing he said before he agreed to help me was, don't apologize, this is how it works. So I kind of, I don't know, that's something that has stuck with me, and I think it works in social media, that if you're thinking, oh, should I reach out to somebody or something like this, that to a certain extent, this is how it works, and people on the other end know how it works.
So I guess you guys think, you're talking about this as well, like the #1 mistakes that might happen through social media, things that you see happen a lot.
I mean, it's somewhat basic, but it's still, you know, since Facebook changes their privacy settings very frequently, just taking like a cold look at how an employer will look at your public profile, putting like a little information on there, but definitely keeping very, very close look at, you know, even which photo albums are open to the public and which aren't, because that trips up people. I don't know, it's a delicate balance between reaching out to like a colleague or a prospective employer via social media and like stalking. And it's like very obvious when certain people want to like make that connection by like, you know, retweeting everything I'm saying during the week. It's going to like pop up in my feed, and it kind of reads quickly as like, well, you're not really interested, you're just trying to like get in my face. And that can be off-putting. But I think, you know, just kind of logging out. Actually, if you just look at your profile in a new browser where you're logged out of everything, and try to look at it as someone who.
And Facebook actually has an option, like even when you're logged in on your page, a view as option. It's like in the top right corner, I think. And you can literally, you can choose to view it as someone who's public, who's not friends with you, or any one of your like friends who you may have unlimited settings. So you can literally view it as anyone else would see it. So that's a really valuable tool that I think a lot of people don't know about.
I think the other thing with networking, in particular on Twitter, is patience. I think people hear about social media and they go, I'm going to get on Twitter and I'm going to meet a bunch of people. And so they start addressing people with kind of no real agenda, and I think that most of that is going to get tuned out. I can say that, like, from the job I have now to a book I had published, almost all those contacts came from Twitter, but they didn't come from the contacts that I thought they were going to come from. You know what I mean? It wasn't like this person's going to publish my book. It was just that I hung out and I got to know people and things happened. You know, so I definitely think that there's a case for being patient. And what I would say is that particularly if there's somebody you want to engage with, try to solve their, I really try to ask, do I have something useful to say to this? You know, I don't go, hey, so-and-so. I might follow somebody and they might go, hey, does anybody have any experience with this code base or something like that? And I'll go, oh, I actually do. You know what I mean? You know, I really wait for that feeling where I go, wow, I am really uniquely suited to answer this question. I don't know, those are some tips that I think. Oh, no, go.
No, I was going to say, as for social media, find out the preferred platform for the person that you're talking to, because some people use Twitter heavily, but some people are more active on Google+. Some people are not active on social media at all. Finding email addresses, I think, is really important. But also, when you contact these people, have a specific thing that you want to contact them with. Don't just say, hey, you know, hey, it's Mark, how you doing? You know, really say, hey, I'd like to have a meeting with you. When are you free? And really try to go for that in real world, in real life contact, you know, coffee, or, you know, can I come to your office or something, whatever works for them. I can't tell you how much it can bring you down if you like contact a person in the wrong way. For example, I had somebody who kept contacting me on Skype. And when I'm using Skype, like I'm on teleconferences, and they would like be buzzing me on Skype, and I'm like, this is not like, you know, and so it automatically puts this person out of my mind. I'm not going to try to contact this person. The other funny story I'll tell you is that when I was in school, an employer had contacted me through MySpace. And yeah, this is but this was like after MySpace wasn't cool anymore, so it was like I wasn't on it. And so the employer had contacted me, and because I wasn't checking like my MySpace like, you know, millions of other people, I missed that sort of employee checking. And especially if you send an email, one of my biggest pet peeves is if you send me an email and I take the time to respond to it and you don't respond for 4 or 5 days later.
That is
then I'm like, okay, never mind, sorry.
I was going to piggyback off what you said as well. You know, yeah, don't apologize, but do be appreciative of their time. And I've had those people as well who email you and they ask for advice, and people like that. I like getting, you know, requests for advice. I'm happy to answer. But when you write a thoughtful reply and you take time out of your day to write it and they don't respond, it's like, well, why did I waste my time? Like, so that's a big pet peeve. I also think if you connect with someone on LinkedIn who you don't know, that's okay. LinkedIn can be good for professional networking, but please, please, please don't use the auto text that LinkedIn sends, because then I have no idea who you are and why you want to connect. I think it goes a long way if you wipe out that text and actually write a personalized message saying, this is who I am, you know, this is why I want to connect with you, you know, can we network on LinkedIn? I think that makes a big difference.
Okay, so do you guys have any personal preference of what social media you guys?
Twitter. No.
I love, actually, Twitter is the same for me because Facebook is such a closed network in a way. It's really just family and friends. And, you know, like the high schoolers, like high school friends that, you know, tell me about their babies. And Tumblr is such a quick hit. It's really hard to start any kind of dialogue there beyond sharing, you know, like images or memes. But Twitter, it's like, especially with the lists, like it's very easy to approach someone in a fairly innocuous way. And I like it when the people who are reading it on Twitter are kind of connected to the other kind of ecology of the industry. And as a quick example, there's this friend of mine, well, like an acquaintance, who would pick me up on Twitter and talk about, like, you know, literary news and books she's reading, books I'm reading. And then I said that she was covering events for this literary blog that doesn't normally cover events. I think she pitched it to them. And then she does one day a week at this independent bookstore in the city. And so she's a toehold in like these different areas. And I love that one of them is still kind of analog because, you know, she's now getting this, you know, online and bookseller and writer trifecta that is, I don't know, it's like just the top of my list. It was like a job opening.
So how would you guys suggest to someone how to secure an interview via media?
I mean, I think the ultimate goal is like you can tweet at someone, you can direct message them, you can send them a LinkedIn request, but the ultimate goal is to go from tweet or LinkedIn request to emails. And then within email, you can actually arrange a meeting or an interview or even an informational interview or a coffee or whatever. So that's really is the goal, is that you can tweet at him a couple times as like an entryway, but eventually you should be able to say, hey, I'd love to take this off Twitter. Do you mind if I email you a few questions? And then hopefully they give you their email address, and you can take it, offline to email, and then eventually to remote.
And be assertive. Don't be afraid to ask for that meeting. Don't be afraid to ask for that interview. Don't ask for an hour of a person's time because people are generally busy. But 15 minutes. Hey, can I grab it with you? Or even on Twitter. People talk about the things that they're going to. They talk about the conferences that they're going to. I am not above kind of stalking them and sort of showing up and oh hey, you're here, hey, give you a business card.
That's why I'm here.
Yeah, exactly. But really, just connect with. It's really about meeting people in real life, and the most important thing is to follow up. I can't tell you how many people I've met that I've thought are creative, brilliant, talented, promising people who have received business cards but never followed up, never emailed me back, never said, hey, can I get that meeting? Because I would have been more than willing to, but the people who take the extra step and say, how can we connect? Those are the people who are going to move forward, not just in sort of interviews, but in life in general.
Okay.
I would say maybe also 2 requests and move on. If you don't get answered in 2 requests, then move on. Doesn't mean you're a bad person. Maybe the person's busy. You don't know what happened, but 2 is good. Move on to somebody else.
Mm-hmm. So how would you guys suggest to following up and staying in touch with your contacts?
Oh man. I mean, once it gets so busy. I mean, I have unread emails every day from my boss. So it's from that on down. I think once a month is good for an email. I mean, that's at the top of the contact hierarchy for me. And if you can see them in person once every 6 weeks or 2 months. I don't know, I think Jim and I are in this boat. How often do we see each other?
Twice a year.
Okay, that's not enough. I should actually borrow money from you then, because...
No, but it's actually kind of interesting because it doesn't feel like that long. Ryan and I met at a social media conference years ago, and we were following each other on Twitter, and I know what's going on.
Yeah.
I could have known. I knew you changed it. It's interesting.
It's a peripheral.
There's definitely an awareness of, I know where to find you.
Because you're always sort of, once you're connected, whether on LinkedIn or Facebook or Twitter, you're always sort of aware of what's going on with the person. I think a lot of times people, after the initial meeting or informational interview or whatever, don't stay in touch, which I think is really a shame. So even just paying them, every few months or. Trying to, like I said, find them at an event or a conference that you might both be at. A lot of times, you talk to someone, you get coffee, you do the informational interview, and then you never hear from them again, which I think is really a shame because there's potential to, build a long-term relationship there.
I'd say just sort of stay in the same circles as the people that you're trying to get interviews with. These guys talk to each other. There are people who I've never ever met in person that I talk with on Twitter on a regular basis. And so I'll give you a real world example. Somebody who I've been talking with on Twitter for maybe 3 years now, met her in person for the first time last week. And we hugged and you thought it was a class reunion or something like that. But really sort of, being on, using hashtags on Twitter. There are a lot of hashtag chats now. There's one for journalists, there's one for media, there's one for PR, there's one for art. You have to find those hashtags, engage with them, because these are the people who are going to potentially hire you, or at least know who can hire you. So be in those circles.
Because a lot of it is timing. I mean, we'll have one opening a year, and if there's someone who I thought was amazing, but it was 11 months ago, it's really difficult to kind of call that person back in your memory.
So do you guys look for trending topics and hashtags for when you're looking to hire?
I don't know, because it's so just diffuse in terms of geography, I suppose.
What I think is better is to take a look at company websites. Twitter, it's twitter.com/jointheflock if you're interested in working at Twitter. And finding out what jobs are available and then reaching out to your contact and saying, hey, I'm interested in applying for this job. Could you tell me more about it? Or or can you, possibly, if we've interacted, can you give me a recommendation or something like that? Because if you have like a specific request and you already know what job it is that you're going for, I think you're going to see much more results than if you sort of do like a cold call. And pretty much every company lists their jobs online, so you don't really have to search that high and low, or even just ask people, if they're hiring.
So are there any other new tools besides Twitter or LinkedIn that you guys would recommend?
For job?
Yeah.
Yeah, Media Bistro's job board is where I found my first job in publishing. And I kind of recommend that if people are interested in media. And I think it's pretty good for publishing in general.
Another site I use is Indeed.com. It searches all the job boards, even the ones that you may not think of going to. So it's a really great tool, and you can set up like RSS feeds or email alerts for the particular job that you're interested in, and you can do it by salary and by location. So if you're interested in jobs that pay $40,000 in New York that deal with media, you can be very specific and granular about it.
I honestly think one of the best places I found to look for jobs is just on LinkedIn. Because companies are always posting jobs on LinkedIn. Most companies see LinkedIn as a very valuable recruiting resource, and that is often the first place recruiters go. So recruiters are all familiar with LinkedIn as a tool, as a professional tool. They post their jobs there, they search for candidates there. So I have found the most effective job searches, particularly for finding a job that is exactly the right fit for you, is often through LinkedIn. So definitely don't overlook that.
And Jim, I know we were talking about this before, and you're actually an example of it, but do you have any tips for introverts?
Yes, the introvert's dilemma. I think there's a little bit of a rap on social media sometimes that extroverts will succeed there and they'll just take over everything now because of people. But actually, I consider myself kind of an introvert, and I found it an incredibly useful tool actually for going to conferences and going for events. Because I'm going to a room where I may know people, but I don't know what they look like, and I don't have a way into a conversation, is like, I'll leave, I'll go home, I'll go some other time. But, when you know people on Twitter or can arrange with, oh, I'll see you there, or you know what I mean? I found it to be an incredible tool for getting much more out of conferences and meeting more people. So, in a way, I feel like that the social media is just going to dice it differently. It's not necessarily favoring extroverts.
Awesome. And last question for now is there such thing as networking too much?
Yeah. Like, nobody wants to talk to that guy at the party who only talks about himself, him or herself. Like, hey, yeah, Mark Lucky Twitter, Mark Lucky Twitter, Mark Lucky Twitter, hey, Mark Lucky Twitter. Like, that gets really annoying really quickly. I think really listening and contributing to a conversation both online and offline is really important. So you're not only talking about yourself. You should, more than anything, let your work speak for itself. So if you have a website, show me where your stuff is. Tell me what you've done, and I can check it out later. You don't have to sort of sell yourself to me. Really, just make me interested, and I think that goes a long way.
I think one of the most valuable pieces of advice I've ever heard in terms of networking is build it before you need it. So, like, if you're the person who's always networking because you want something out of people that you meet, if you're only talking to people and networking because you want to get a job out of them or you want to get something out of them, then I think you're less effective. But if you're just getting to know people and you're not necessarily looking to get anything out of them, and you're just building relationships with no sort of, necessarily set purpose or goal out of them, I think just building relationships, and then when you actually do need to look for a job or, no one wants to be, no one wants to feel like they're being used or they're constantly being asked about jobs. But I think just building relationships first is often a better approach.
Well, thank you guys. We're going to move into the Q&A session. So if you guys have a question, just raise your hand, and then I want you guys to stand, just introduce yourself real quick. And the questions we're kind of looking for are more general and less about, hey, I had this particular issue to myself on this social media thing. We're looking for more questions about broader topics. So if you guys have a question.
I'm very good for connecting with people on a professional level, but in general, most people, I think, see Facebook messages as pretty personal.
Auto direct messaging, terrible. Any kind of auto thank you, follow, bad. Any kind of generic messaging, even if it follows something you heard in a social media seminar about thanking people and being nice, don't do it. Because it's just like, I mean, if I follow somebody and I get a kind of a generic thank you, I would probably unfollow. So I feel like anytime I feel like somebody is not actually talking to me, but is just running some generic line on me, I'm probably going to lose interest.
Over tweeting, like tweeting way too much within a short period of time, that means you're filling up my timeline. It makes me more aware of you, and if you continue to do it, I'm going to unfollow you. Over hashtagging, like putting hashtags on every single word is like so super annoying. Just really sort of, you know, you wouldn't be a douche in real life, don't be a douche on social media.
I think there's also, if you have like a, if you have like the company or a job or a position that you think is like your dream position, like seeing how the ethos of that organization would treat social media. So, you know, I'm lucky because I have a little bit more leverage because, you know, we publish like a variety of books, so I don't have to, like if we published purely, you know, conservative books, I think I wouldn't be very public, because you're the public face of your company and online in a lot of ways. I think that if you're, you know, lucky enough to get that job that is like you're really passionate about because you like have the same personality as like the company in some organization, nonprofit, working that way.
Questions?
So you actually don't need a smartphone to tweet. You can tweet from any phone. My mother has a flip phone, she tweets from it. What you do is go to the Twitter site and under your settings, click on mobile, and you can hook up your mobile device. So you can basically tweet to 40404, and it will go to the Twitter site just as it would like if you sent it through a smartphone. And actually, this, you know, being a journalist, this comes in handy when, you know, during things like Sandy and emergency situations where everybody's using the telephone and everybody's trying to call, having that emergency tweet set up, it doesn't take as many characters. I can continue to text and continue to tweet through my regular cell phone.
And in fact, in the early days of Twitter, this was a popular way to tweet.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. That's how Twitter started. Way back in the old days, 2006.
And I'm glad you brought that up because I think that it's really expensive to buy these new tools. And when I was job searching, New York was like my favorite town to be broke in because there's always going to be like some, for me in publishing, there was always some book event that was free, or there was some like meetup, and you know, some like, I don't know, some startup will be like, okay, we're going to buy like wine for everybody for an hour. So it's like, you know, it's so much free wine. It was never a hindrance. So you could kind of do a lot more in-person stuff for cheap, rather than having to save up to buy like the MacBook or something.
Thank you. I think a lot of people on Twitter and Facebook, if somebody creeps me up that I don't know, if they're a stranger, I just block them. But, you know, there is no, if there is reason to feel like they're very creepy, like if you get a spammy sort of message, if you get, so I have turned on subscribers on Facebook, which, if you guys are familiar with, allows people to access things that you post publicly on Facebook, but it does come with some additional sort of things to think about when it comes to privacy, and you do tend to get a lot of weirdos through it. So I just, you know, I don't hesitate in, if I feel like someone is creepy, just block them. If it goes, you know, if it goes beyond online information, that gets a little tougher to advise on. I think, you know, I rarely ever share my location where I am on social networks unless it's a very public setting like this. You know, like I would tweet that I'm at this conference at Pratt Institute, but other than that, I never share Foursquare check-ins or your location. You know, I don't try to share too many personal details online. I tend to keep it very professional just so that people don't have too much personal information about you. Really, I don't hesitate to block anyone who's creepy.
If you don't share it, they don't know it. So if you don't share, stuff that people shouldn't know about you, then nobody will ever know. The thing about me, speaking of check-ins, is I'm a big Instagrammer. I don't Instagram anything that I'm actually there. Like, I'll wait till after I leave to Instagram, because people are like, hey, I just saw your picture, are you here, sort of things. Facebook, I don't check into a place until after I've left. Privacy is a big concern, but because I still am inherently social, I still want to share these things, but I try to do it in a way that, won't be too stalkery.
I always say, think about it like Christmas. People take time to put gifts in pretty boxes for a reason, because that builds up the anticipation. You wouldn't put a puppy in a cardboard box. You'd be like, oh, what is that? So really think about the presentation. Anything, if any of you guys are design students, you know the importance of design because it communicates a little bit of yourself. So when people use like templates and stuff like that, I don't hold it against them, but I do sort of wonder why you didn't take the extra time to sort of, even, instead of using the automatic templates, going to a website or finding a template. For personal websites, making sure that it's just reflective of who you are, because the first thing I'm going to see is the design before I ever see the content. But the content should be as stellar as possible.
If I had that problem, I would be inclined to use Tumblr instead of Blogger. I think that there's a lot more templates on Tumblr, and they don't stay out as much. You don't I'm not hit like, oh, I don't know. I tend to be more lenient on Tumblr as far as using templates.
Yeah.
Can I ask a quick follow-up to what you just said? Does that look bad to use Tumblr as a professional thing?
I do.
Yeah.
I used to blog on movable type that I operated myself, and that died, and I moved everything to Tumblr.
And I think what I like to do when I catch up on what's changing in technology is I'll just look at like tech journalists' own sites. They tend to be at the forefront of what's good to collect everything together, what looks nice without doing a lot of work because they're so busy. So they just changed their name to Rewrite Web guys.
Oh, right.
I just go check out their home pages. Also, Clay Shirky is one of the premier technologists in the world, and he has the shittiest blog template. And somebody asked him, they were like, "Oh, is this a political statement against design?" And he's like, "No, I don't know how to do design." He's like, "My words are good enough."
I honestly think, when I look at someone's blog, I'm looking to see, whether they're passionate, whether they, can write properly and have proper grammar and can construct sentences and have good ideas. If it's a cheap blogger template, I don't particularly think that matters. I think what matters more is your thoughts and your ideas and your words.
One more question. Any other?
I'm Pratt.